packed their bags on a Tuesday morning, and I stood at the kitchen window watching my son load the car like he was going on the best vacation of his life. 3 suitcases, a cooler, his wife's yoga mat rolled up and strapped to the roof rack. Her mother, Brenda, came out of my front door, carrying a tote bag full of paperback novels and sunscreen, laughing at something my son had said. They were driving to Kelowna for 10 days. Wine country, lake views, spa treatments, I'd later find out. I had not been invited. I want to be clear about something before I go any further. I am 67 years old. I have lived in this house for 34 years. I raised my son Aaron in this house after his father passed. I kept the property going through 2 recessions, 1 major roof replacement, and a winter that burst 3 pipes and flooded the basement. This house, this half-acre in the Fraser Valley, is mine. My name is the only name on the deed. And yet somehow, over the course of the 3 years since Aaron married Simone, I had become a guest in my own life. That Tuesday morning, as I watched them drive away, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not sadness, not the usual ache of being overlooked. Something colder, cleaner, something that felt almost like clarity. It hadn't always been like this. Aaron was a good boy, quiet, a little serious but kind in the way that matters. He remembered birthdays. He called on Sundays. He cried at his father's funeral in a way that broke my heart and put it back together at the same time. When he told me he'd met someone, I was genuinely happy for him. He was 34 and had spent too many years working overtime at his engineering job and coming home to a 1-bedroom apartment in Burnaby. He deserved someone. Simone was charming at first. Sharp sense of humor, good with a wine list, asked me real questions about my life. I liked her. I told my friend Audrey that I thought she was lovely. I meant it. The shift was gradual, the way these things usually are. You don't notice it happening because each individual moment is small enough to explain away. Simone mentioning casually that the guest bedroom would make a better home office. Aaron nodding along. Me saying, sure. I can move a few things. Simone's mother, Brenda, coming to stay for a long weekend that stretched into 3 weeks because she had a falling out with her landlord in Abbotsford and needed some time to sort things out. Aaron telling me it was temporary. That was 14 months before they drove to Kelowna. Brenda never went back to Abbotsford. She had a bedroom. She had a parking spot. She had a shelf in the fridge that she'd labeled. Actually labeled, with a piece of masking tape with her first name. She watched her shows at full volume in the living room every evening from 7 to 10. Once I came downstairs at 9:30 because I couldn't sleep, and she looked at me like I'd interrupted something. In my own living room, at 9:30 at night, I started spending more time in the kitchen, then mostly in my bedroom. My world and my own house got smaller and smaller. And I told myself this was fine. This was just what family looked like now. This was me being generous and flexible and modern about things. Aaron saw it. I know he did. There were moments. A glance across the dinner table. A half-started sentence. Where I could see the boy I raised. The one who knew right from wrong. But Simone had a way of filling every room with her presence. And whatever Aaron might have said in those moments, he didn't say it. The money started about a year in. Aaron and I had a joint account that we'd set up years ago when his father was sick and I needed help managing medical expenses and pharmacy runs. We'd kept it because it was convenient. I was older, Aaron was nearby. It made sense to have someone with access in case something happened to me. There was never a formal agreement about it. It was just trust, the kind you have with your own child. I noticed the withdrawals slowly. $60 here, $140 there. I'm not a suspicious person by nature, so at first I assumed it was Aaron covering some shared expense I'd forgotten about, or a bill that had come through early. When I mentioned it once, Simone was the one who answered before Aaron could open his mouth. We needed a few things for the house, she said. Aaron said it was fine. Aaron didn't correct her. I let it go. By the spring, I added it up. Over 7 months, almost $4,000 had left that account through withdrawals or transfers I hadn't authorized. $4,000 that I had saved carefully over years of teaching elementary school and skipping vacations and buying the store brand everything. $4,000 gone into what turned out to be Simone and Brenda's shared spending account. Brenda's prescriptions, Simone's online shopping, 3 months of a streaming service I'd never heard of, and, I found out later, a significant portion of the Kelowna trip, the trip I was not invited on. I know how this sounds. I know some people will say I should have said something sooner, set firmer limits, been less accommodating. Maybe they're right. But I was 67 and grieving, in a quiet way, the family I thought I'd built. And I kept hoping Aaron would come back to himself. I kept waiting for the version of my son I knew to stand up. He didn't stand up. He packed the car and drove away, and Brenda sat in the back seat and didn't wave. The first thing I did after they left was make coffee. I stood at the counter in my suddenly quiet kitchen, and I made a full pot, and I drank the first cup by the back window, looking out at the yard. It was a nice morning, cool for July, the kind of morning where the mountains are still visible before the haze sets in. I had a second cup. I thought about my father, who had built a cabinet shop in Nanaimo from nothing, who had told me once that the worst thing a person could do was mistake patience for permission. I had been patient for 3 years. I had confused my silence with generosity. I had let my own home become somewhere I felt like a visitor. I rinsed my cup, put it in the drying rack, and went to get my jacket. My first stop was the TD branch on the main road in town. I'd been banking there for over 20 years. The manager, a woman about my daughter-in-law's age, named, well, she knew me, and that mattered. I sat down across from her and I explained the situation plainly. The joint account, the withdrawals I hadn't approved, the amounts, the timeline. I had a small notebook where I'd been writing things down for the past 2 months. Dates, amounts, what was purchased when I could find out. She looked at the records. She didn't say much, but her expression said enough. I removed my name from the joint account and transferred my savings into a new account. Sole ownership, new card, new PIN, new everything. I also set up a notification on my checking account so I'd get a text every time a transaction was made. Simple things. Things I should have done a long time ago. She asked if I wanted to file anything formal. I said not yet. I said I wanted to understand what I was dealing with first. My second stop was a legal office 2 blocks down. I didn't have an appointment, but they had a walk-in hour on Tuesday mornings, and a paralegal named an older man with a very calm manner sat with me for 45 minutes. I asked him about the joint account withdrawals and whether I had any recourse. He explained my options clearly. He also raised something I hadn't come in to ask about. Brenda had been living in my home for over a year. Given the circumstances, it was worth looking into what that meant legally in terms of her status as an occupant. He gave me some paperwork to take home and read. I drove home, made a sandwich, and sat at the kitchen table with the paperwork and my reading glasses and my second pot of coffee. It was the most like myself I'd felt in months. Aaron called on day 3. I was in the garden when my phone buzzed. I'd been deadheading the roses, something I'd let go too long, and I was working through the beds methodically, which is what I do when I need to think. I looked at the screen, wiped my hands on my jeans, answered, "Mom." His voice was tense in a way I recognized, not upset at me tense, cornered tense. "What happened with the account?" "I closed the joint account," I said. "I should have done it sooner." Silence. "Then Simone is really upset." I set down my pruning shears. "Aaron," I said, $4,000 came out of that account over 7 months. I didn't approve any of it. Do you understand that? He didn't say anything. "That money was mine," I said. "I saved it. It was not household money. It was not shared money. It was my money that I allowed you access to in case of emergency." This was not an emergency. It was just things came up. The house needed. "The house is fine," I said. "The house has been fine for 34 years. What's changed is that there are 2 extra people living in it who don't pay rent, and money has been leaving my account to cover their expenses." Another silence. Longer this time. "We'll talk about it when we get back," he said finally. "Yes," I said, "we will." I hung up and went back to the roses. The mountains were clear that afternoon. A perfect July day. I worked until the light started to change, and then I went inside and made dinner for one, which I ate at my kitchen table with the radio on, and it was one of the best meals I'd had in a long time. They came back on a Friday. The dynamic shift was immediate. Simone was cold in the careful way of someone who wants you to know they're angry but won't say it outright. Brenda avoided the kitchen when I was in it. Aaron looked tired and wouldn't meet my eyes for the first 2 days. On Saturday evening, Aaron knocked on my bedroom door. He came in and sat on the edge of the chair by the window. The chair where he used to sit when he was little and had bad dreams and needed to just be near someone. I let him sit for a moment before I said anything. "I'm not trying to punish you," I said. "I'm trying to survive in my own home." He nodded slowly. He looked older than 37. "I know things got out of hand," he said. "I didn't realize how much you did realize," I said, gently but clearly. "That's the part we need to be honest about. You knew. You just didn't do anything about it." He didn't argue. That was something. We talked for almost 2 hours. It was the first real conversation we'd had in a long time, the kind that doesn't have an audience, doesn't have anyone steering it. I told him about the withdrawals, all of them, the full amount. I told him about the appointment with the paralegal and what I'd learned about Brenda's legal standing in the house. I told him that if things didn't change, I was going to have to make different arrangements, and I meant it. He asked what I needed. I told him I needed the joint account to stay closed. I needed Brenda to have a firm timeline for finding her own housing. I suggested 3 months. The paralegal had indicated that was reasonable given the circumstances. I needed Aaron to be my son again, not a bystander in his own life. And I needed an apology, not a performed one, not a defensive one, a real one. He gave me all 4. It took a few days, and the conversation with Simone was difficult, and Aaron was in the middle of it in a way that I think cost him something. But it happened. Brenda moved into a 1-bedroom rental in Chilliwack in late September. It was a nice enough place. She showed me photos on her phone, which I thought was oddly conciliatory of her. And I was gracious about it. I didn't need to be her enemy. I just needed her to not be in my house. Simone and I will probably never be close. I've made peace with that. She's not a bad person. I think she's someone who learned early that the way you get things is to quietly take them. And nobody ever pushed back hard enough to teach her otherwise. I'm not angry at her anymore. But I also know what I know. The money. The $4,000. I didn't push for repayment. Aaron offered, and I told him to put it toward their own savings instead. I'd rather have my son back than a check. That's a choice I made with clear eyes, and I don't regret it. What changed was the house. My house. It is mine again in the way it used to be. I come downstairs at 9:30 at night if I feel like it. I have a friend, my neighbor Audrey, who comes over for tea on Thursday afternoons, and we sit in the living room and watch the light change over the valley, and nobody looks at me like I'm in the way. Aaron comes for dinner on Sundays, just him, sometimes, or with Simone if she wants to come. He calls on weekday evenings sometimes, just to check in, the way he used to before everything got complicated. Last month, he came over on a Saturday with no agenda, just to help me fix the gate latch that had been sticking, and we spent the afternoon puttering around the yard the way we used to when he was young, and I was teaching him how things work. I made us both coffee after. We sat on the back steps and watched a pair of ravens in the birch tree at the edge of the property. Neither of us said much. We didn't need to. There's a version of this story where I stayed quiet, where I kept shrinking my world down room by room until I was just a ghost in my own house. I almost became that woman. I could feel her taking shape. But I thought about my father and his cabinet shop. I thought about patience and permission. And one Tuesday morning, while the car was barely out of the driveway, I put on my jacket and picked up my keys, and I went and took my life back, not dramatically, not with a speech or a scene, just quietly, one step at a time, the way you do anything that matters. That's the part I want you to remember. Not the betrayal, not the money, not even the ending. Just that it's possible to be 67, to be tired, to have let things go too far, and to still be able to turn it around. I know because I did it. On a Tuesday morning in July, with cold coffee and gardening gloves and absolutely nothing left to lose. I think about my father a lot these days. He used to say that the way you treat people quietly, when no one is watching, when there's nothing to gain, that's the only real measure of who you are. He wasn't a philosopher. He ran a cabinet shop, but he understood something about cause and effect that took me 67 years to fully apply to my own life. What happened in my house didn't happen overnight. It happened slowly the way erosion works. Not one dramatic storm, but years of small moments where I chose to stay quiet, to be accommodating, to give the benefit of the doubt. And every time I did that without a boundary, without an honest word, I was teaching the people around me what was acceptable. That's not blame I'm placing on them entirely. Some of it belongs to me. I let the pattern form. I watered it with my own silence. Aaron is not a bad person. I need to say that clearly because it's true. But somewhere along the way, he stopped using his own judgment, stopped asking himself what was right, and started just going along with whatever made the immediate tension disappear. That's not cruelty. It's something quieter and in some ways harder to fix. It's the slow forgetting of your own moral compass. He knew on some level that money was leaving my account. He knew Brenda had been in my home for over a year with no plan to leave. He knew I had shrunk my own world down to a bedroom and a kitchen. He knew, and he looked away. And that looking away cost both of us something real. What I had to do. Going to the bank, sitting with the paralegal, having that long conversation with my son. None of it required anything dramatic. It required clarity. It required me to look at the situation honestly, gather the facts, understand my options, and act on what I knew to be true. Not out of anger, out of a very plain understanding that what was happening was wrong and that I was the only one in a position to stop it. That's the part that took the most out of me, honestly. Not the logistics. The willingness to act on what I already knew, because I'd known for a long time. I just kept finding reasons to wait. There's something that happens when you finally stop waiting. When you take the uncomfortable step, have the hard conversation, make the decision you've been avoiding. The situation doesn't immediately get easier. Aaron and I had some very difficult weeks after I came home from the bank. But something in me settled because I had finally been honest with him and with myself. I had done the right thing, even though it was hard. And there is a kind of steadiness that comes from that. A kind of self-respect that nothing else can give you. I'm not the same woman who stood at that kitchen window watching them drive away. I look like her. I live in her house. But I moved through something that summer and came out the other side with a clearer sense of what I will and won't accept, what I owe the people I love, and what I owe myself. Aaron comes for dinner on Sundays. The gate latch works now. The roses are doing well. That's enough. That's actually more than enough.